Yes, sir.
Senator Scott, we haven't passed as a Congress a complete budget since 1997. We've done nothing but continuous resolutions. So when can we see the real job of Congress being enacted and pass budgets on a yearly basis?
Anytime a man shows up in a Tax Act shirt, know that there's a financial question coming. And it's going to be a hard one, too. Next question. Thank you very much. May the Lord have mercy on the brother. You know what I'm saying? But 26 years ago, 1997, a long time ago, without any question. One of the things I'd say with great clarity is that every time we have a continuing resolution, it imperils the spending of our country. And that's why your question is so critically important. When you look at the fact that our military struggles, number one, to have focus on war fighting, with all the generals, all the DOD, all the presidential appointees having our military unfocused. We shouldn't be socially experimenting on our military. We should be focusing in our military on war fighting and coming home safe. Not DEI, not ESG, not vaccine mandates. But in addition to that lack of focus because of President Biden, we also have the most expensive way of making decisions, which is short-term spending. When you're short-term spending, they do not look out 5 years for the next military opportunity in research and development because their budget only goes for 3 or 4 or 5 months. That imperils and cripples our military that needs the resources to be spent effectively. The only way for us to get there is to get through every single appropriations bill so that we can get to a budget. We haven't done that since 97, but we are not any closer to getting there. Number one, elections have consequences. So we better start winning as a party. We must get not only a speaker, but we have to actually have both houses working together on the appropriations process so that we get to a budget. That is nowhere in sight, to be honest with you. It's not happening this Congress or next Congress. But I will tell you, as the next president of the United States, I will put the pressure on Congress to produce all 12 appropriations bills so that we can get to a budget. The last time we, frankly, had a serious conversation, frankly, not only about a budget, but about spending decreases, was in 2011. And I assume you followed it back in 2011 when we had the BCA, the Budget and Control Act. That we cut $40 billion in actual spending for the first time since the early 1990s. And we did that as a result of a budget deal that went off the tracks and allowed us to cut spending because they didn't believe we would do it. Thankfully, I was on the right side of that issue, and I look forward to being the president that gets us to a budget. Second thing I'd say, sir, is that the importance of a budget cannot be overstated. The only place in America where you can overspend is Washington, D.C. Every state in the nation has a balanced budget requirement. They can't they can't deficit spending. Well, under President Biden, he decided he was going to spend, I have to swallow before I say this, $7 trillion, knowing that the revenue stream was $4.8 to $4.9 trillion. That's a budget that overspends by 40%. It's like a household that knows their income is $48,000 and planning to spend $70,000. Please raise your hand if you would do that on purpose. Not a single soul raised their hand. But that came after last year's overspending of over $1 trillion. And so for us to get back on a sustainable path, not just to have a budget, but to quit overspending, we need to recognize that in the last 4 years, what we've done poorly, miserably, is allowing, under this administration, for us to continue to spend like there's a COVID emergency. COVID is no longer a health emergency for this nation. We need to take our non-defense discretionary spending back to pre-COVID, which is 2019. That would save this nation on hard dollars at least $500 billion. And as you watch the budget go, and I assume you're a budget guy, as you watch the budget go, I believe it's not $500 billion. I think it's well over $1 trillion because of the way the budget trajectory goes. When spending is high, it just gets higher every year. So if you want to cut that back, you have to actually go back to 2019 where you have lower discretionary spending. If you do that, you save money for the rest of the history of the country, from my perspective. And that is how we, A, control spending, and B, get closer to a budget, and then C, we have to have a balanced budget amendment that requires this nation to do what every other family that I know of common sense does in their own household. Balance your budget. And I believe that will require us to grow our economy in a way that President Biden has not done. First quarter of this year, growth in our private sector economy was 1%. Anytime you introduce socialism with your first bill in Congress, $1.9 trillion, y'all remember the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill? It only lacked one thing, COVID relief. It was called COVID relief, but there was 1% for vaccines and less than 10% for COVID-related health care. The other $1.7 trillion was driven on their social experimentation and sending checks to families in the mail, along with other disastrous policy decisions. And so we have to purge that out of the economy, because artificial spending only creates the inflation that we've all grappled with, which then loses about $6,000 to $7,000 per family in spending power. And that causes interest rates to spike 11 consecutive rate increases in a row. That makes a house less affordable for everyone, but specifically first-time home buyers. So that's part of my formula for getting it right as a country, is to do what most families of common sense do every single year.